May 27th, 1940. Northern France. The British Army is in full retreat. German panzer divisions have torn through Allied lines like a knife through paper. The Blitzkrieg, lightning war, has shattered the French defenses. Hundreds of thousands of British and French troops are fleeing toward Dunkirk, the last port before the English Channel. Across the countryside, the roads are clogged with abandoned vehicles. Soldiers are throwing away rifles, helmets, anything that might slow them down. Officers have lost control of their units. The sound of German artillery grows louder by the hour. The mood is panic, desperation, defeat. And then, somewhere near the village of Lepinet, a British soldier does something nobody expects. He stops running. He turns around to face the enemy, and he pulls out a sword, not a bayonet, not a combat knife, a full-length Scottish basket-hilted broadsword. 3 feet of sharpened steel. His men stare at him like he's lost his mind. The Germans, entrenched in a stone farmhouse 100 yards away, have no idea what they're looking at. The British officer raises the sword high above his head, gleaming in the afternoon sun. Then, with his other hand, he lifts a set of bagpipes to his lips. The sound cuts through the chaos. High, wailing, unmistakable, the ancient war cry of the Scottish Highlands now echoing across a 20th century battlefield. And then he charges, straight at the German position, sword raised, bagpipes screaming. His men, half terrified, half inspired, follow him. They have no idea what they're doing. They just know they can't let this lunatic die alone. The Germans open fire. Bullets kick up dirt around him. One tears through his sleeve. Another ricochets off a rock at his feet. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't slow down. He doesn't stop playing the bagpipes. He reaches the farmhouse, kicks in the wooden door with his boot, and drives his sword into the first German soldier he sees. The blade goes through the man's shoulder. He screams and collapses. Jack yanks the sword free and turns to the other Germans in the room. They stare at him. This wild-eyed British officer, sword dripping blood, bagpipe still strapped to his side. One by one, they raise their hands. They surrender. Not because they're outnumbered, not because they're outgunned, but because they have absolutely no idea what the hell they just witnessed. The British officer's name is Lieutenant John Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill, but everyone just calls him Mad Jack. And over the next 5 years, he will fight World War II with a longbow, a broadsword, and a set of bagpipes, becoming one of the most decorated, most fearless, and most completely insane commandos in British military history. This is his story. Jack Churchill was born on September 16, 1906, in Hong Kong at the height of the British Empire. His father, Alec Fleming Churchill, was a civil engineer working on infrastructure projects across Britain's colonial territories. His mother was from a military family. Jack grew up surrounded by stories of adventure, exploration, and combat. His childhood was spent moving between Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, Hong Kong, and England. By the time he was a teenager, he had lived on 3 continents and learned to speak multiple languages. Jack was tall, athletic, and completely fearless. He loved taking risks. He loved standing out, and he hated being told what to do. At age 18, he entered the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, the legendary training ground for British Army officers. It was 1924. The First World War had ended just 6 years earlier, and the British military was still reeling from the trauma. But Jack hadn't seen the trenches. He hadn't seen the gas attacks, the mass slaughter, the senseless carnage. To him, war was still romantic, glorious, heroic. He graduated from Sandhurst in 1926 and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Manchester Regiment. He was 20 years old. He was immediately posted to Burma, where the British were maintaining control over their colonial holdings. For nearly a decade, Jack served in remote jungle outposts, leading patrols, dealing with bandits, and learning how to survive in hostile environments. He also learned something important. He was very, very good at fighting. But he was also bored out of his mind, because the British Empire in the 1930s was peaceful, stagnant. There were no great wars to fight, no grand battles, just endless bureaucracy and garrison duty. Jack Churchill hated it. In 1936, at the age of 30, he did something almost unheard of for a British officer. He resigned his commission and left the army. He moved back to England and started looking for adventure elsewhere. He became a male model, yes, really, posing for advertisements and magazine covers. He worked as a newspaper editor in Nairobi, Kenya. He learned to play the bagpipes and became so good that he competed at the Aldershot Tattoo, a major British military music competition. He won. Jack also took up archery, and not just for fun. He competed at the 1939 World Archery Championships in Oslo, representing Great Britain. He didn't win, but he made it to the finals. He was one of the best archers in the world. In 1940, he was hired as an extra in the film The Thief of Baghdad, a big-budget adventure movie starring Sabu. Jack played an archer in one of the battle scenes. He loved it. For 3 years, Jack Churchill lived the life of a Renaissance man, athlete, musician, model, actor, adventurer. He was living his best life. And then, on September 1st, 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland. 2 days later, Britain declared war on Germany. Jack didn't hesitate. Within a week, he rejoined the British Army. He was 33 years old, older than most frontline soldiers, but he didn't care. He wanted back in. He was assigned to the Manchester Regiment and sent to France as part of the British Expeditionary Force, the same unit he had served with a decade earlier. And that's when things got weird, because when Jack Churchill reported for duty in France, he didn't just bring his standard-issue rifle and gear, he brought his longbow, his broadsword, and his bagpipes. His commanding officers were baffled. "Lieutenant Churchill, what the hell are those?" "My sword, sir, and my bow, and my pipes." "You can't take those into combat." "With respect, sir, I can, and I will." His fellow soldiers thought he was insane. Officers tried to order him to leave the weapons behind. Jack's response became legendary. Any officer who goes into action without his sword is improperly dressed. He wasn't joking. He genuinely believed it. And on May 27, 1940, near the village of L'Épinette in northern France, Jack Churchill proved that medieval weapons still had a place on the modern battlefield. During a skirmish with a German patrol, Jack's unit was pinned down by enemy fire. The Germans were holed up in a farmhouse, using it as a defensive position. While his men took cover and returned fire with rifles, Jack pulled out his longbow. He knocked an arrow, drew the string back to his cheek, aimed, and fired. The arrow flew 100 yards through the air and hit a German soldier square in the chest. The man dropped instantly. Jack had just made the only confirmed longbow kill by a British soldier in World War II. It would not be his last unusual kill. As the British retreat to Dunkirk intensified, Jack refused to run. He stood his ground, rallied his men with his bagpipes, and fought a rearguard action with his sword drawn. He made it to the beaches of Dunkirk. He was evacuated back to England along with over 300,000 other Allied troops. And the moment he set foot on British soil, he volunteered for the Commandos. In the summer of 1940, Winston Churchill, no relation to Jack, decided that Britain needed a new kind of soldier. Not line infantry, not tank crews, but small elite raiding units capable of striking the enemy where they least expected it. He called them Commandos. The Commandos were modeled after irregular forces, guerrilla fighters, raiders, pirates. Their job was to land on enemy coasts, blow things up, kill as many Germans as possible, and escape before reinforcements arrived. It was dangerous, reckless, borderline suicidal. Jack Churchill thought it sounded perfect. He joined No. 3 Commando in late 1940 and threw himself into training. Amphibious landings, close quarters combat, knife fighting, demolitions, night raids, survival training, and through it all, Jack insisted on carrying his sword and longbow. At first, his fellow commandos thought he was a joke, but then they saw him fight. During training exercises, Jack would charge enemy positions with his sword drawn, moving so fast and so aggressively that even experienced soldiers couldn't stop him. He was also completely, utterly fearless, not in the reckless, stupid way, in the calculated, terrifying way. Jack understood that fear was contagious. If a leader showed fear, his men would feel it. But if a leader showed no fear at all, if he acted like he was invincible, his men would believe it. And Jack made sure everyone believed he was invincible. In December 1941, Jack got his first major commando mission, Operation Archery. The target was Vågsøy, a small island off the coast of Norway occupied by German forces. The mission was to destroy German facilities, capture prisoners, and gather intelligence on German defenses. Jack's job was to lead the assault on the German headquarters in the town of South Vågsøy. On the morning of December 27, 1941, British commandos landed on the beaches of Vågsøy under the cover of naval bombardment. German soldiers opened fire from bunkers, buildings, and fortified positions, and Jack Churchill, sword in hand, bagpipes strapped to his back, charged straight at them. His men later said they didn't follow him because they were brave. They followed him because they were more afraid of being left behind with a maniac like Jack leading the charge. Jack kicked in the door of the German headquarters building. Inside, a dozen German officers were scrambling for their weapons. Jack leveled his sword at the throat of the senior German officer and barked in fluent German, "Hände hoch, oder ich töte dich." Hands up, or I kill you. The officer looked at the sword, then at Jack's face, wild-eyed, blood-spattered, completely calm. He raised his hands. One by one, the other Germans did the same. Jack Churchill had just captured 12 German officers without firing a shot. But he wasn't done. Over the next 2 hours, Jack moved through the town like a one-man wrecking crew. He kicked in doors, pointed his sword at terrified German soldiers, demanded surrender. Some tried to fight back. Jack cut them down with his sword. Most just surrendered. By the end of the raid, Jack had personally captured 42 German soldiers, not with a rifle, not with a grenade, with a sword, and sheer unrelenting intimidation. The raid was a massive success. The Commandos destroyed German oil facilities, captured critical intelligence documents, and sank several German ships in the harbor. Jack Churchill was awarded the Military Cross for his actions. But the war was just getting started. In July 1943, the Allies launched Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily. It was the first major amphibious assault on Axis-held Europe, and it was going to be bloody. Jack was assigned to lead a commando unit in a beach landing near the town of Catania on Sicily's eastern coast. As his landing craft approached the beach, German machine guns opened fire from concrete bunkers and fortified positions. Bullets tore through the air. Men were hit before they even reached the sand. Jack stood at the front of the boat, fully exposed to enemy fire, and lifted his bagpipes to his lips. He started playing. His men thought he'd finally lost it. But then they realized what he was doing. He was drawing fire away from them and onto himself. The Germans saw a lone figure standing upright in the landing craft, playing bagpipes, and they focused all their fire on him. The boat hit the sand. Jack leapt out, bagpipes still wailing, sword raised high, and charged up the beach. His men, terrified, inspired, confused, followed him. They took the beach. Jack was hit by shrapnel in the neck and left shoulder. Blood poured down his uniform. He refused medical evacuation. He kept fighting. For his actions at Sicily, Jack was awarded a bar to his Military Cross, a second Military Cross, one of the highest honors in the British Army. But Jack's luck was about to run out. In September 1943, Allied forces landed at Salerno, on the Italian mainland, in an attempt to knock Italy out of the war. The Germans were waiting. Jack was ordered to lead a night raid on a German observation post overlooking the Salerno beachhead. The post was on top of a steep hill, heavily defended and strategically critical. Jack took 42 commandos, his lucky number. They moved silently through the darkness, climbing the rocky terrain, avoiding German patrols. They were 50 yards from the observation post when the Germans opened fire. It was an ambush. Machine guns erupted from 3 sides. Mortar rounds rained down. Grenades exploded. Within 5 minutes, most of Jack's men were dead or dying. Jack fought like a demon. He used his sword to cut down German soldiers in the darkness. He threw grenades. He fired his pistol until it was empty. But there were too many. A mortar shell exploded 10 feet away. The blast threw Jack into the air and slammed him into the rocky ground. When he woke up, his ears were ringing, his vision was blurred, and he was surrounded by German soldiers with rifles pointed at his head. Mad Jack Churchill, the man who had fought Nazis with a sword, a bow, and bagpipes for 3 years, was now a prisoner of war. Jack was taken to a temporary POW holding facility in southern Italy. He was interrogated by German intelligence officers who couldn't believe what they were hearing. "You fought with a sword?" "Yes." "And a bow and arrow?" "Yes." "And bagpipes?" "Obviously." The Germans thought he was lying or insane, possibly both. Within weeks, Jack and a fellow British officer named Rowe decided they weren't going to sit around waiting for the war to end. They escaped. Under the cover of darkness, they slipped past the guards, climbed over the fence, and made a run for the Allied lines, 60 miles away through German-occupied Italy. They traveled by night, hiding in barns and forests during the day. They survived on stolen vegetables and water from streams. For 8 days, they moved south, getting closer and closer to Allied territory. And then, on the 8th day, they were caught by a German patrol. Jack was furious. He was transferred north to Sachsenhausen concentration camp, near Berlin, one of the most brutal camps in the Nazi system. It was used for political prisoners, resistance fighters, and POWs deemed dangerous. Jack was definitely dangerous. He refused to work. He refused to cooperate. He spent his days planning escapes. In September 1944, he and a group of prisoners managed to slip out of the camp through a drainage tunnel. They made it 5 miles before they were recaptured. Jack was thrown into solitary confinement. He spent weeks in a dark, freezing cell with almost no food. But he didn't break. In April 1945, as the Soviet army closed in on Berlin, the Germans began evacuating Sachsenhausen. Jack and hundreds of other prisoners were forced on a death march south toward Austria. They marched for weeks. Prisoners who couldn't keep up were shot. Jack kept up. Eventually, they reached a camp in Tyrol, in the Austrian Alps. The guards, sensing the end of the war, began abandoning their posts. Jack didn't wait for liberation. On a cold spring morning, he simply walked out of the camp. No dramatic escape, no tunnel, no fight. He just walked out, and he kept walking. For 8 days, Jack walked through the Austrian Alps, heading south toward Italy. He had no map, no compass, just a rough sense of direction and an unshakable belief that he would make it. He walked 150 miles. He survived on stolen potatoes, wild onions, and water from mountain streams. He avoided German patrols. He slept in caves and abandoned barns. On May 5, 1945, he stumbled into a small village in northern Italy that had just been liberated by American forces. The American soldiers saw a filthy, bearded man in a tattered British uniform carrying a rusted sword walking out of the mountains like some kind of ghost. They thought he was a German infiltrator. Jack tried to explain that he was a British officer. The Americans didn't believe him, so Jack played his bagpipes. The Americans arrested him anyway, just to be safe. It took 2 days for British command to confirm his identity and secure his release. By the time Jack was officially freed, Germany had surrendered. The war in Europe was over. Jack was furious. He had missed the end of the war. His reaction, according to witnesses, "If it wasn't for those damn Yanks, we could have kept the war going another 10 years. He wasn't entirely serious. Probably. But he was genuinely disappointed that he hadn't been there for the final victory. So Jack did what Jack always did. He volunteered for another fight. He asked to be sent to the Pacific Theater. He wanted to fight Japan. The British Army agreed. Jack was sent to Burma, where British and Commonwealth forces were still battling Japanese troops in the jungles. Jack was excited. He finally had another war to fight. And then, on August 6, 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 3 days later, a second bomb hit Nagasaki. On August 15, 1945, Japan surrendered. The war was over. Jack Churchill had fought from 1940 to 1945 across France, Norway, Sicily, Italy, Germany, and Austria. He had been wounded multiple times, captured twice, escaped twice, and walked 150 miles through enemy territory. And he had done it all with a sword, a longbow, and a set of bagpipes. After the war, most soldiers went home. They got jobs. They started families. They tried to forget. Not Jack Churchill. He stayed in the British Army. But peacetime didn't suit him. He was bored. Again. So, at the age of 40, Jack decided to learn how to parachute. He became a parachute instructor and spent the next decade training new recruits. He was known for his unconventional teaching methods. Once, During a training exercise, he allegedly fired a live mortar round near a group of soldiers to teach them about the importance of taking cover quickly. The soldiers were terrified. Jack thought it was hilarious. In the 1950s, Jack moved to Australia for a few years. There, he discovered surfing. He loved it. He designed his own surfboard and became one of the first people to surf Australia's eastern beaches. When he returned to England, he brought surfing with him. In 1955, Jack became the first person to surf the Severn Bore, a tidal wave that travels up the River Severn in western England. He rode it on a homemade board at the age of 49. He also built model steamboats in his backyard, raced them in local competitions, and won several times. Jack Churchill never stopped seeking adventure. He retired from the British Army in 1959 at the age of 53, with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. He had been awarded the Distinguished Service Order with Bar, the Military Cross with Bar, and had been mentioned in dispatches multiple times. He spent his later years in Surrey, England, living a quiet life with his wife and 2 sons. He gardened, he read, he built things. He rarely spoke about the war. When journalists asked him why he had carried a sword and bagpipes into battle, he would smile and say, "I wanted my men to know that I wasn't afraid, and I wanted the enemy to think I was completely insane." Both strategies worked. Jack Churchill died peacefully in his home on March 8, 1996, at the age of 89. His obituary in the Times of London carried the headline, "The last man to kill an enemy with a longbow." In a war defined by mechanized slaughter, by bombers, tanks, flamethrowers, and eventually atomic bombs, one man chose to fight with a sword and a bow. Not because he was insane, but because he understood something that most people didn't. Warfare isn't just about technology. It's not just about firepower or numbers. It's about will. Fear is contagious, but so is courage. And Jack Churchill radiated courage in a way that was impossible to ignore. His enemies thought he was invincible. His men believed they were invincible because they followed him. He killed enemy soldiers with a longbow in the 20th century. He captured dozens of men with nothing but a sword and his voice. He escaped from concentration camps. He walked 150 miles through enemy territory alone with nothing but determination. And through it all, he played the bagpipes. They called him Mad Jack. But maybe, in a world consumed by industrial-scale madness, Jack Churchill was the sanest man alive. He refused to let modern warfare strip away what he believed in: honor, courage, tradition, and the warrior's code. He fought on his own terms. He lived on his own terms. And when he died, at the age of 89, surrounded by family, he left behind a legacy that will never be forgotten. Lieutenant Colonel John Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill, DSO and Bar, MC and Bar, the man who brought a sword to a gunfight and won every single time.